gone through some struggle with body image. Maybe it's really severe, maybe it wasn't. And I know for the majority of women struggle with body image hardcore, and I struggled with it hardcore. There were times in my life I truly thought I was ugly, okay? And I literally looked in the mirror and I thought I was disgusting and gross and never gonna look like this other girl. So if I heard something like that from a pastor or a leader, I'd be like, wow, I'm the ugly girl. And no guys are really gonna want me because I'm not fine enough. I'm not a Victoria's Secret model. I don't have a perfect butt. I have cellulite. have curves. Like, or maybe you feel skinny and you're like, I don't have enough curves, right? If I had heard this, and I felt ugly personally, like I felt and I struggle with body image, I would be like, I would feel hopeless. Like there's nobody going to be out there for me because I don't look like those model type girls that are 9, 10, 11. I'm not one of the Kardashians, okay? And this is where like it's so bad because there are many people that struggle with what they look like. And I don't know, and I'm not here to say whether they are objectively beautiful or not. Like that is very subjective based on every different person. But there are many people who don't feel that beautiful. And this kind of message is saying to them, you're never going to find someone that really loves you because you're not fine enough.
Yeah. And if you actually think about it, I was thinking as you're talking, like you would never hear something like it's easier to get a fine man saved than an ugly man.
Right.
Fine.
Exactly.
Ugly. Like the whole entire adage in itself at its core for me is just super like boys locker room. Like immature and totally like gross in the sense of how just dehumanizing it is. Like it is so 100%. Sexually objectifying to a female made in God's image. And so that's where I'm like.
And can I say something?
Sure.
I just have to say that this is where it also I feel like, and I want to speak on behalf for my ladies because I think this is especially a struggle for ladies. These comments, this kind of a clip, this especially said from a leader that is male, and why it's so problematic is because you don't see it often that way. You don't often see a fine quote unquote guy with a girl that maybe isn't as quote unquote as fine as him. Now, I'm not here to judge that on like that's subjective to each person. But what you do see are guys who, don't even really groom themselves. And yet their standard of a woman is a Victoria's Secret model. And I'm like, dude, you don't even brush your teeth and you are wanting Kim Kardashian style girl that happens to love the Bible. And you actually do see some of those guys end up with girls like that, but you rarely see it happen the opposite way. And that's why it gets me that extra PO'd that this was coming from a man,
right?
Two men mainly, because I'm like, okay, this is like horrible. It's so horrible. Yeah. I mean, especially for women, but also for men. And you can speak to why it's so horrible to perpetuate that idea to men. Oh,
I think it's a poison pill for men. Like, I think we already naturally have a naturally hard time, growing to a point where we say, you know what? Physical attraction is not king. It's actually not the most important thing I'm looking for in my spouse. Like, for a man to grow into a man and be able to say that takes a lot. So I feel like it's taking 10 steps backwards for a guy and to teach from any kind of platform to say, you want them to be fine. Like you want to be all over them. Like they should, when you see them for the first time, you should be turned on like a light bulb,
like
right?
You can't
like
help
barking
but look
and woofing
take.
at them. Like that's the last thing a guy needs to hear when he is looking for a spouse.
Because it also continues to perpetuate that whole thing, which we talked about on the last season, the sex season, that men are more visually wired than women and that men can't control themselves.
Yeah.
Go listen to where we covered that.
Physiologically, like men are more visually wired than women. Like this is a proven fact. Scientifically, like neurologically, we are more visually wired. It takes a lot less visually for men to be turned on than it does a woman. But that does not mean, even though it might be initially incredibly strong for us men, it doesn't mean it should be the top bucket of attraction for us as men, right? Like we have to work against our flesh and nature to say, this is important to me, especially naturally, but I know because of wisdom. I know because I listen to people who are wiser than me, more mature than me, that when they say, listen, character, spiritual character is more important than physical looks, I listen. And more importantly, I don't have to just listen to people in my life. I can read the truth of God's word, which remains more supreme than anyone's lecture or opinion around me in my day. And that's for me the big thing, right? Like, hey, thank you everyone for your opinions. I'm going to go ahead and just go to the Bible and consult the Bible. Hey, if I was to build a list about what's important in my godly spouse, my godly partner, what would the Bible say?
Right.
Right? And the Bible is more clear than any pastor, than any podcast about what is important. And that's the truth of God's word. This is literally God's letter to you and me saying, this is like God of the universe who created you and formed you. I think I'm going to take it from him on what I should look for. Okay. Proverbs 31:30. Godliness is superior to beauty or a handsome face. Not only do they go, off the bat to tell us what is the most important, which is godliness, they go out of their way to say, and to clarify, it's definitely not beauty or a handsome face. Proverbs 17:19 tells us to shy away from those who quarrel, right? Someone who loves to fight, who conflict follows. Proverbs 12:18. Avoid those with sharp tongues, critical people. Okay. This is as I'm building my list. Okay. I'm formulating it. Proverbs 31, all of Proverbs 31, which you'll talk about even more, it directs us towards what? A virtuous spouse, for their price is far above any rubies or jewels. Okay. Character. 1 Timothy 4:12. Look for a growing godly character. 1 John 3:17-18. Look for a charitable heart. Kindness.
Absolutely.
I'm like mind blowing.
Dude, you know what it is too? Is if you get married under this pretense that you have to have a physical spark, and that's the thing driving you. Who's to say if that's the thing driving you, that when you get married, even if you get married to someone fine, quote unquote, that you're not going to meet someone else who's fine and have a physical spark with them and then be questioning, should I be with this person? Because now I have a physical spark with this person. Like, it's such a bad thing when this person said, like, you need to have a physical spark to even draw you in. I'm like, what? That should not be what draws you in.
Right.
You should have a physical connection. Absolutely. Do not get married if you have zero or very little physical connection. But that is a horrible thing to draw you in and make you want to be with somebody.
Yeah. You talk about a foundation to build a relationship, like building a house. When we talk about Christ as the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. If you want to find that sinking sand, build your relationship on physical attraction.
Yep.
And that is your sinking sand. Because when you marry someone, you're marrying a best friend. You're not marrying a sexual object. And to reduce them to a sexual object in any kind of capacity, not only are I believe that's actually sinning, right? Because you are reducing a human being to an object, right? But two, that is the worst foundation you could ever build a marriage on.
Agreed.
And we'll talk about the two different types of love, but to clarify biblically, like when Adam first saw his wife, he didn't go woof. Like his inner dog didn't come out and say, woo,
she's so fine.
She is so fun. I'm about to tap that and start producing,
babies.
Right. Like that's the fruit that God is talking about to go, be fruitful, multiply. Like, let's do this. He said, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. What an odd thing to say. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He's not saying is there a spark here? There's a spark, God. There's a spark. He's not saying,
He's not like, gosh, she's ugly. Like,
right.
why did you
He's
send
not
me this
saying,
person?
like, do I love this woman? He says, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And he's saying, oh my goodness, I am you and you are me. And in your presence, I am reminded of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I am reminded of who I am. And that is relationship. You are reminding each other of who you are. And